This is my third class regarding software effort estimation techniques. In the first class, we just introduced what are the various effort estimation techniques and explained the bottom-up estimation strategy in detail. In the second class or last class, we went through the top-down estimation approach, then expert judgment, and last, estimation by analogy. In this class, we are dealing with function point analysis, function point estimation technique, and it was developed by a person known as Albrecht. So this method is known as Albrecht function point analysis. So let us move towards the Albrecht function point analysis. Okay. This is a top-down approach, a top-down method. In the previous class, we already explained the top-down estimation strategy. There we saw it is characterized by parametric or algorithmic models. This function point analysis is a top-down method. Several parameters are needed to estimate, or for the analysis we need several parameters. And it was devised by Albrecht, I mentioned already. When he worked for IBM, he developed this function point analysis. He was investigating programming productivity and needed to quantify the functional size of programs independently of their programming languages. He developed the idea of function points. The basis of function point analysis is that information systems comprise 5 major components or 5 major external user types that are of benefit to the users. It was Albert's function point analysis basis. So he defined 5 major components or 5 major external user types. Based on that 5 parameters, function point analysis is done, or the function point estimation is done based on the 5 various parameters or 5 major components. That components are collectively known as external user types. So this analysis is a top-down method. Okay. Then we shall look to the various external user types in detail. The first user type is known as external input types. External input types. External input types are the input transactions which update internal computer files. The input transactions that update the internal files stored in a computer. So the first external user type is the external input types. The second external user type is the external output types. External output type. Corresponding to the input type, there exists an output. The output can be a report, or it may be a screen display, or it may be an external inquiry type. Any can be an output. So external output types are the transactions where data is output to the user. From the system to the user, what information or what data is output to the user. Such transactions are external output type. The next is external inquiry type. Inquiry. The external inquiry types are the transactions that are initiated by the user. It provides information. The user provides some information, or the user initiates some transaction to the system, but they do not update the internal files. If it modifies or updates the internal computer files, such transactions are the external input types. The input from the user that do not update the internal files. The user inputs some information that directs the system to the details required. Such external types are known as external inquiry type. Here, the third external type is external inquiry type. They are from user to the system, but they do not modify the or update the internal files. Okay. Then fourth one, logical internal file types. Internal file types. They are the standing files used by the system. The files existing within the system, or it can also be considered as a group of data items that is accessed together. In the modern information systems or in the software systems, we can see either a file or a group of data items known as database, or both files and databases. Such type of files or such type of data items can be considered as an external user type, the logical internal file type. Therefore, the fourth parameter or the fourth type is logical internal file type, that is used for the function point analysis. Okay. The fifth external user type, the next one is external interface file type. External interface interface file types allow for output and input that may pass to and from other computer applications. It means that these interfaces accept user data input and pass this data to the system. Also, after processing this data, it may be stored to the logical internal file, or it send back the result or the information to the user through this interface, external interface. So, the external interface file types allow for user output and user input. Also, the input is passed to the system and the output is passed from the computer application or from the system. For that purpose, we are using, or the fifth external user type, external interface file type is used. So here we are using 5 different external user types: external input type, external output type, external inquiry type, logical internal file type, and fifth one, external interface file type. Okay. The analyst identifies each instance of each external user type in the application. Each component is then classified as having either low complexity or average complexity or high complexity. The count of each external user type in each complexity band are multiplied by specified weights. That weight is shown in the table. Here, for the external input type, the multiplier for low complexity is 3. The multiplier for average complexity is 4. And the multiplier for high complexity is 6. The table shows the 5 external user types along with the corresponding count or the corresponding multiplier value. And the count is multiplied by the specified weights to get the function point score. Then the function point scores are summed to obtain an overall function point count. It indicates the information processing size. So, each of the count is multiplied with the corresponding multiplier value and total sum is obtained, and that sum can be considered as the overall function point count of the count that indicates the information processing size. Okay. With functional points as originally defined by Albert, the question of whether the external user type was of high complexity, low complexity, or average complexity was intuitive. The International Function Point User Group, shortly known as IFPUG, they has now promulgated rules on how this is accessed. How an external user type was of high complexity, low complexity, or average complexity. how this can be accessed. In the case of logical internal files and external interface files, the boundaries are shown in the table. They are used to decide the complexity level. Similar tables exist for external input type, external output type, etc. In this table, if the number of record type is 1 and the number of data type is less than 20, it can be considered as low complexity. If the number of record type is 1 and the number of data types range between 20 to 50, it can be considered as a low complexity. If the number of record type is 1 and number of data type is greater than 50, then it will be average complexity. Such a table is shown with the case of logical internal files and external interface files. Okay. Function point analysis recognizes that the effort required to implement a computer-based information system relates not just to the number and complexity of the features provided, but also the operational environment of the system. So, the effort required to implement a computer-based system is dependent upon the operational environment of the system. Based on the operational environment, 14 factors have been identified which can influence the degree of difficulty associated with implementing a system. 14 factors. That factors can be considered as general system characteristics. 14 general system characteristics are identified which influence the degree of difficulty associated with implementing a system. The list that produced by Albrecht related particularly to the concerns of information system. It is based on a computer-based information system. The factors dependent during the early 1990s or late 1980s. Our current technology is a new technology. These 14 factors identified during late 1980s or early 1990s. Okay. The value adjustment factor VAF, it is calculated or it is based on the 14 factors, also known as general system characteristics, that rate the general functionality of the application being counted. The VAF is based on, or the value adjustment factor is calculated, and it is purely based on the 14 factors or 14 general system characteristics. Each characteristic has associated descriptions that help determine the degrees of influence of the characteristics. The degrees of influence range on a scale of 0 to 5. The ratings are, if the degree of influence is 0, it means that not present or no influence. If the degree of influence value is equal to 1, it means that incidental influence. If it is 2, it means that moderate influence. The value 3 indicates average influence. Value 4 denotes significant influence. And the value 5, the degree of influence is maximum, that is strong influence throughout. So the ratings are no influence, incidental influence, moderate influence, average, significant, and strong influence throughout. Range between or range on a scale of 0 to 5. Let us move to the general system characteristic description. GSCs at a glance. A brief description about general system characteristic. The first one, data communications. How many communication facilities are there to aid in the transfer or exchange information with the application or system? Data communication facilities. How many facilities are there? Communication facilities are there for the data transfer or the data exchange within the application or within the system or with the application and the user or other devices that are attached to the system. Second one, distributed data processing. How are distributed data and processing functions handled? How data are distributed? How distributed data processing functions are handled? How these data processing functions perform? The third one is performance. Did the user require response time or throughput? It means that the performance of a system is based upon the response time or throughput of the system. Did the user require response time or throughput? Then fourth one, heavily used configuration. How heavily used is the current hardware platform where the application will be executed? How heavily used is the current hardware platform where the system or the newly developed application will be executed? Fifth one, transaction rate. How frequently are transactions executed? Whether the transactions are executed daily or whether these transactions are weekly transactions or whether they are monthly transactions or yearly transactions. In general, the transaction rate denotes how frequently are transactions executed, daily, weekly, monthly, etc. Then sixth one, online data entry. Online data entry. What percentage of the information is entered online? How many data can be what amount of data can be, what percentage of data can be entered to the system through online. Online data entry means the percentage of information or data that is entered online. Then next, seventh one, end user efficiency. End user efficiency means whether the application or whether our new system designed for end user efficiency or not. Was the application designed for end user efficiency? Then eighth one, online update. Online update. How many internal logical files are updated by online transactions? The internal logical files are residing within our system. How many files, how many internal logical files are updated through online transactions? Next, ninth one, complex processing. Does the application have extensive logical or mathematical processing? Whether the newly developed system have an extensive logical processing or mathematical processing. Then next, 10th one, reusability. Was the application developed to meet one or many users' needs? It means that whether the newly developed system can meet only a single user or multiple users' need. It is reusability. Next, 11th one, installation ease. How difficult is conversion and installation? Whether the installation is easy or not, whether the conversion is easy or not, the installation of the new system, how much difficult is the conversion and installation? Next, 12th one, operational ease. How effective and automated are startup, backup, and recovery procedures? How effective or how automated are these operational procedures, whether the operation of the new system is easy or not? How difficult is the operation of the new system? That is operational ease. Then next, 13th, multiple sites. Was the application specifically designed, developed, and supported to be installed at multiple sites for multiple organizations? Whether the developed system, whether our developed software system can be supported by multiple organizations at multiple locations. This multiple sites. And the last one and the 14th one, facilitate change. Was the application specifically designed, developed, and supported to facilitate change? Whether the newly developed system was designed to facilitate change, whether it was developed, whether it was supported to facilitate change. That is the last one, 14th one. So here we went through the 14 general system characteristics. They are data communications, distributed data processing, performance, heavily used configuration, transaction rate, online data entry, end user efficiency, online update, complex processing, reusability, installation ease, operational ease, multiple sites and facilitate change. Let us move to function point calculation steps. Now we all know function points are a unit measure for software, like an hour to measure time, or miles to measure distance, or Celsius to measure temperature. Function points are an ordinal measure for the software. Here we saw 5 large classes and 14 general system characteristics. Then our objective is to calculate or to perform the function point analysis, function point calculate steps. Identify and count internal logical files, external interface files, external inputs, as well as external output, and last, external inquiries or external inquiry type. Identify and count the external input as well as external output, external inquiry, external logical files, and external interface files. The first step is to identify the 5 external types and count the external types within the system. The next step is to, using the complexity matrices, count the number of low complexity, average complexity, and high complexity of these 5 major classes. The second step is to identify the number of low complexities of external input, the number of average complexities of external input, the number of high complexity of external input, as well as external outputs, external queries, inquiries, internal logical files, and external input interface, external interface files. Find out the complexity values, low complexity, average complexity, and high complexity of these 5 major external user types. Next step is to calculate the UAF. UAF means unadjusted function point. Compute the total unadjusted function point. That is the third step. Then fourth step is to determine the values of the 14 GSCs. The 14th general system characteristics values are identified. The next step is to calculate the sum the total characteristics. Then next, our final step, determining the total function points with the total function point formula. The total function point formula is 0.65 plus 0.01 into total of general system characteristics into UAF, unadjusted function point value. By using this total function point formula, the total function points will be determined or calculated.